Welcome everyone to our Startups and Entrepreneurship panel. My name is Jonik Zhu, senior studying chemistry and philosophy, but really going to the tech space as a product manager, soon with Zillow. So really this panel is really close to home in the sense that I really started my first few internship experience are startups. So just a quick overview, we will going through 30, 40 minutes of prepared questions. In the meantime, if you do have any questions for the panelists, for me, feel free to throw it in the chat or just private message me, and then we'll leave 10, 15 minutes for questions. So we're really fortunate to have Mike and Sheila here to talk us about their journey in startups and entrepreneurship. So with that, I'll hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Maybe just tell us your year, what you studied at Northwestern, and what you're doing right now.
Did you want me to go, Mike?
Please.
Okay. So my name is Sheila Patel. I'm 1999 graduate. My majors were sociology, and I had a business institutions minor. And right now, currently, I'm running my third company, which is a nonprofit company. It's called Gotham Scholars. I have a t-shirt on for you. It's called Gotham Scholars. It's an education nonprofit supporting first-generation, low-income high school students that are sort of high potential and bridging the academic gap, providing college access support, and partnering with New York public school system, essentially with consortium schools and high schools, to be able to sort of mine for the diamonds and help them aim higher. So we have sort of a staff of, I don't know, about 15 people that all sort of support each cohort in each class at the moment. So it's a really young startup. We started during the pandemic. And I can get into more of that if you'd like. Prior to that, I owned a consumer goods company, which is sort of paused because of this real shift in my own professional career and need that I identified. So it's sort of like you break even and don't get to reap all the benefits, but that's on hold until it's time. And yeah, basically that's me now.
Great. My name is Mike Ward. I'm a 1995 grad. I was poli-sci major with a minor, I think is what they called it, in econ. I was Navy ROTC when I was at Northwestern, so they paid for my school, which was nice. But then I owed them 5 years. So I was in the Navy for 5 years where I was an intelligence officer. So I spent some time in Virginia and then in Jacksonville, Florida with an F-18 squadron, and then up in Washington, D.C., where I was the intelligence briefer for the Secretary of the Navy for a little bit in the Pentagon. I went to Harvard Business School, and then that took me down to Dallas for the Boston Consulting Group for a few years. And then I left there to join a venture capital firm in Baltimore called Questmark. I was there for 14 years. And then just in 2020, two partners and I spun out to start a new firm called Harmonic. We're a late stage venture fund. So companies that have already gotten off the ground, they usually have on the early side, kind of high single digits in revenue. And then we'll go as late as we possibly can. So we're leading kind of Series B or Series C type rounds. Writing $10 million checks. We invest across different sectors, trying to find what we think are market leaders with decades-long growth ahead of them. The company that you probably heard of is Peloton, which is a little bit of our claim to fame in our last fund, which went on a good run during the pandemic, a little bit of a silver lining. But most of what we do is kind of boring in enterprise software and things like that. But we've done healthcare IT, fintech, enterprise software, security, infrastructure, mobile, maybe some other sectors along the way. But that's what we do. We're based in Washington, D.C., Chevy Chase technically, and we have an office in San Francisco as well.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sheila. We'll start our conversation off with your time at Northwestern. So can you just share us a little bit, what are some of the more impactful classes or experience that you can still remember today that either shaped your academic experience or has some impact to your career choices? Mike, do you want to get this one started?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, John, just tell us who you want to kick off. It's interesting. So as a poli-sci major, my mom warned me that I'd never get hired, and that's probably true. I had a job already lined up with the Navy, so I guess I wasn't in a lot of pressure to go in any particular direction with my major. I'm glad I had the econ kind of side minor. I think that probably looked better when I was applying to business school than anything else. No real class stood out to me particularly for the longer term. I like the smaller classes. I like the seminars that we did. I loved the Buddhism class that I did. I think that's probably had the longest term impact for undergrad. But there was anything in particular that kind of set me on any particular course towards my future. I think probably what benefited the most while I was at Northwestern was to stay kind of abreast of what was going on outside of the university, kind of what the trends were, what people were talking about. And at the time, so you think about me graduating in 1995, it was just in the run up to what was ultimately the first bubble. And so venture capital was really kind of a new institutional asset class. People were just kind of hearing about it. And then as I left Northwestern and as I was in the Navy, obviously between 1995 and 2000, during the first bull run in venture, it was kind of the most interesting thing that you might be able to do at that particular time. And so I had some indication of that was happening. And so what I would say is do whatever you can, with your studies, obviously, to get yourself in a position for the future. But I think it's really important to kind of pay attention through whatever means you can of what kind of the growing tech trends are in the industry. I'm very biased towards knowing what the tech trends are. I think it's the future. I think it's the only way to kind of have long-term viability within the marketplace. Obviously, that's just said with extreme, just for controversy. But I think like if, on your feeds, whenever you can, I would add key venture capitalists, kind of see what they're talking about. I'd pick up on what trends are going out there, kind of top 5, 10 things that people are investing behind in the early stage, because inevitably some of those are going to pan out and they're going to be probably the best paths to be on longer term for your career. And so whatever you're doing in school, I would also kind of keep a toe in what's happening in Silicon Valley, what's happening in the venture world, and kind of what sectors are kind of emerging to get in shape. Like NFTs obviously are kind of like the buzz right now. Web3, we'll see all these things play out, but inevitably over the last 20 years, like all of the things that have become mainstream have been 3 to 5 years earlier within venture. So I just keep an eye on that.
You want me to
Go
next, Johnny?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I have a slightly different answer, I'd say, but I think that all of the things that Mike said are true, and especially about just keeping up with what's going on in the world outside of the Evanston bubble. I 100% agree with that. I, like I said, was a social major business minor. I started out a math major. And so I would like to say that probably had something to do with my career starting in consulting. So I didn't really go into the history. I just gave you the end result of where I'm at now. But I was in consulting for 7 years. And then I worked in brand development. I ran the signature core women's business for Bath & Body Works for 10 years. And from there, of course, went into one of 3 startups. First, of course, just not many executives leave. The beauty industry is very small and the personal care industry is relatively small. So when executives leave, there's a nice consulting opportunity that I took advantage of right away, at which point, decided to go into my own company. But what I'd say back to the question is, I think on a macro level, I think the classes, when I look back on Northwestern, I think the classes that were most impactful were the ones that made me think, teach me how to think, and teach me how to think more with more curiosity and creativity than your traditional, because I took a whole slew of math, IE courses, things like that. So one of the ones that comes to mind is 20th Century American Lit without Professor Appel, who I imagine is not there now, but it was one of my favorite classes because I think it was the predecessor. It's sort of the liberal arts version of STEAM. It brought music and art and literature and writing and all these various mediums together to think about what was happening when Hemingway was writing about Nick Adams and what was happening in the world, and thinking about how the world influences every part of industry. And I still think of that class. I talk to my students about it still, because I think he was just incredibly brilliant at not just teaching the literature itself, but teaching all of the influences to every piece of work written, let alone any other class, I applied that as well. And when I think about the skills that I took to go into 7 years of consulting, I'd say really similar to Mike. I think understanding how to, consulting is about taking on an industry and understanding it relatively quickly to be able to solve. In my case, I was in customer strategy work for most of the time. And what you had to do was understand the customer, understand the work, understand how they made the products they made in a 3 to 4 week window, and then figure out what you were going to do to be able to advise companies on how to solve their, customer business problem, if you will. It's really a loose way of describing that job. But what I'd say is the classes that you take, I think I would agree that my econ, math, those things really did probably look good on a resume to be able to secure my job my senior year. I'm sure that helped. Certainly internships helped as well, which I did. But I do think that in the long run, it's those classes that made me sort of, I don't know, be able to really think on my feet and think about world influences on whatever topic, whether it's American Express, walking into them, or, now walking into a public high school in New York. I mean, it's just sort of, you're constantly having to quickly tweak, adjust, and think about the world and how you're going to approach this business that that's in front of you. I hope that answers what you were asking.
Yeah, of course. I think there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about what a lot of folks are studying, and it's absolutely great to every time hear about alums talking about their perspective, navigate their coursework work and how they connect that to their work. But on that note, I'm very curious about both of your experience in consulting. So that's your job out of school. Can you share a bit more about what your thought processes was looking for different jobs when you were in school and what you were looking for when it was early on in your career? Maybe Shirley can continue on that note.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you guys were. I mean, I was a student loan kid, so getting a job was really important to me, and having one that was going to really support me to have my own apartment and all of those things was really important. So from day one, I was kind of stressed out by that, I'd say, hence exploring every aspect of engineering and all of the things. So what I would say is, I think I graduated right in 1999. It was like the tech boom. I mean, everything was happening then. People didn't know what was going to happen in the year 2000, and they were ramping up with young people at tech firms. That's what they were doing. So for me, I just really went where I thought security would be and where I could just use my brain and start off my life. I thought it would be really helpful to learn a lot of different industries. So I worked from automotive, energy, financial services. I ended up in sort of a customer strategy space, which was perfect for me because I wasn't super tech and I didn't necessarily want to be at the time. So it was a great place for me to be able to engage with technology, but thinking about businesses from a strategic perspective and really how to increase customer, loyalty was a big thing that people were doing then, because, companies weren't really integrated. I mean, tech was just really booming then. And it was all about companies catching up to the software that existed, to all of the new technologies that could support their businesses. And so I just thought that was it's not very fun, but it was a safe bet. It felt like it was a really safe bet for me to go and start learning what I wanted to do. I know I didn't think I wanted to be a consultant forever, but I just thought it was where the smart people went, and I could earn a great living and learn about a lot of different companies. And I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sheila, I'd echo that. So I definitely learned more. My 2 years at BCG, I learned more than any other 2 years of my entire career. I mean, partly because I worked 7 days a week, 20 hours.
That's true.
But also, I think the kind of the pressure and the speed and the people that you're around is just absorbed a lot. And to your point, I think it's a lot around how to think around businesses, to think around different frameworks of where those businesses fit in, to aggregate from this particular situation to let's look at this from a higher level, kind of what's the business model here, where are the key assumptions around what could be successful, how does the market look at these particular companies, kind of what the macro level environment is, and then a lot of people skills, trying to convince people to do things or just engage with a customer, or maybe more important, to be commercial in the ability to kind of sell follow-on work, which is just as important as anything else. And so it's kind of early in sales, which I guess at some point everybody's in. But the decision to get into that wasn't particularly intelligent. I've always just kind of gone after the next best opportunity. I've never really known exactly what was gonna be next for me, or never really chased after anything. So I always just kind of thought, I'm here, this next thing looks really interesting, I'm randomly qualified to do this thing, let's go after that and make the most of it. And so coming out of HBS, I didn't know if I wanted to have a particular geography to shoot at, a particular industry, or any particular functional role. So if you kind of think about that, 3 ways to think about your next steps. And so coming out of HBS, it was very natural, obviously, for people to go to the BCGs and the McKinseys of the world. So I interviewed and went in that direction. I think it was smart for me personally because I had a military background. I didn't have any kind of signals that I was going to be viable within the private sector. And so to go to BCG kind of got that stamp of approval in whatever way that makes sense, that somebody hired me in the private sector with a good name that I could leverage into the next thing. But I was there for 2.5 years and covered a lot of different sectors, a lot of different cases. And so from that, it kind of gave me an idea, a little bit of what I want to do next, but kind of the general tools that it embedded in me, I've used those every single day since. And so I liked it. I don't know if it's an end in itself for a lot of people. I knew I wasn't as good. Like I have a friend who's still there, and he's killing it. And he's really, really good at consulting and being commercial. And I knew that wasn't me. I knew I was working twice as hard as he was and not having the same amount of success. And I didn't want to work every single weekend that much of time. So I don't think it's for everybody, but it's good for a sprint.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, moving on to the more startup entrepreneurship space, it sounds like both of you are looking for some sort of stability and career development in the consulting space. But can you share to us a bit, what is the thing that tipped the scale for you to prompt you to enjoying startup and ventures, and then how does that process look like? Mike, if you want to start.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Again, this is another thing where I was at BCG. I mean, the story is they had an internal job board. And so Fortune 500 companies and others would come and they'd post jobs on the BCG job board because they thought they'd be good candidates kind of as they left. It was probably the most visited website within the firm just because, people leave there constantly. And so the job for Questmark, the venture firm, came up. It seemed like it was interesting. It seemed like a great next step. It was in the Mid-Atlantic where my wife's from. So that kind of worked out with family. And so I look back and I didn't ask any of the questions I should have asked. Like, I didn't know if these guys were gonna be able to raise another fund. I didn't know who their investor base was. They didn't have much performance on the books. And so we didn't know if we had viability there, but I just had a good sense for who the team was. They checked out with the people that I talked to. And so I made the move. So if I kind of look back and recreate that, if I would have done it smarter, I think I would have spent a lot more time in the months running up to that transition, getting into the space and where and how I wanted to enter it. I took kind of the first opportunity that I was given instead of kind of identifying it as interesting and then spending 6 months or a year making a much smarter transition over time. I think when I think about why I like it, it's different every day. It's a mile wide. You can become an expert in certain areas. But every day you're kind of chasing after different stuff. I do like the art of the deal. And I like kind of the idea of putting together a portfolio. So I like the idea of being a VC in that particular aspect of kind of how we want to construct it and how we want it to look overall and what aspects we want to our overall portfolio. But every day it's, you're creating your own schedule. You're completely self-directed. No one's telling you exactly what to do, and you just have to make it happen. Similar as BCG. Like, there's no training at BCG. You either survive or you don't.
Yeah.
At least at the time. Maybe there's a little more training now. But I like that. You're kind of, I think that's kind of, they put the level of success in your hands. And it either works or it doesn't. Sheila?
Yeah, so much of that rings true. So for me, what gave me the bug, I guess, right? And then why do I keep doing it? Why why do we do this insanity? Okay, so what gave me the bug is this. So I left Bath and Body Works. I mean, it was a decision on after having had over a decade there. I was there for 12 years. And it was kind of time to move on. And I thought, so I jumped into, I didn't even jump into it. I had clients coming to me. I created this sort of consulting thing. I thought it was a nice interim opportunity. I thought for sure I wanted to be someone's right hand to build a company from scratch. That's what I thought. I wanted to be sort of their chief of staff, make it happen. I knew how to run a big brand. I knew what it took. I knew the customer mindset because Bath and Body Works has 60 million at the time women walking across that lease line every day. I knew I'd been studying this customer for a very long time. So, you know, the thought of helping an established founder was what I thought I had to do. And I had the opportunity to meet Bobbi Brown, who is a cosmetics, you know, sort of genius. And she created this empire now known as Bobbi Brown Cosmetics, sold to Estee Lauder quite a long time ago. And she needed someone to help build a product line for a hotel she was opening, and start, you know, sort of think through the product line, et cetera, engage with vendors, et cetera, things that I knew kind of with one hand tied behind my back. So it was an easy thing for me to do. I actually thought she wanted somebody younger. So I took the meeting to be able to connect her to people that used to work for me. And then she was like, no, let's just work together. And I was, you know, honored. And I thought, this is it. I can be a right hand. I could do, this is it, you know? And so we started working for 5 months, and it was great and painful. But I learned a ton about what an incredible entrepreneur, how they make decisions every day, how you can't rely on all of the sort of corporate, you know, teams that are built to support you to do so many things like I had at Bath and Body Works. So that 5 months was an incredible training. And she had asked for me to stay on to kind of help her build her new, at least be part of the team that would help build her new product line that's now on the market called Jones Road. And at that point, we had a heart-to-heart, and I talked to my husband too, and I said, I've just been the person building the brand for someone else for now, at that point, almost 13 years. And I said, I think this is it. I got to go. If I don't want to be her right hand, well, I don't want to be a right hand. I thought I did, but I don't, because she would certainly be a successful person to link to and help build a business with. She's already done it. And we had a great rapport. So at that point, I knew I had to move. So we had a wonderful conversation, and I started taking my, you know, over a decade of knowledge in the personal care industry and found American Small Business Labs and started creating. And from there, you know, what is now Graffiti Collective, a very, very tiny indie, you know, skincare brand was born about 4 years ago now. But the bug, so that's how I got into it. It was really just realizing that what I thought I wanted to do wasn't at all. I wanted to be the one that made the calls. I wanted to be the one that either succeeded or failed. And I wanted it to be on my shoulders. I don't know that everybody wants that. So, and I didn't think I did. So anyway, that's what I did. And the bug now remains, I mean, certainly finding another opportunity and creating Gotham Scholars, which is a level of reward, professional fulfillment I've never felt before, which is awesome. It's just, I think what Mike talked about, I like the daily problem solving. I enjoy it. And I really enjoy knowing that something is put out there. In my case, whether it's a consumer good or now it's, you know, education, I see the benefits of what I put out in the world, and have a support staff and sort of build this sort of world that I think is incredible to be able to, I don't know, call the shots on, but also see the fruits of all of that labor come to life. That's definitely my bug.
Awesome. I think both of you shared a lot about how the day-to-day work really excites you. So really just put that more into context, can you share more about one specific either project, product, or companies that you launch or help launch that really stands out to you? Can give us more context of what are kind of the work that we do. Sheila, do you want to take that? Or my,
Yeah, so your question is either a project or a company, something that has launched that I reflect on and think really highly of,
Right.
essentially. I don't know, I think, okay, so I'll go back many years. My very first product I ever launched in my life, and working at Bath and Body Works in 2005, Neil Fisk, actually ex-BCG, was the CEO, and he was looking for ex-consultants or consultants to come and help revamp that business. So he hired a lot of consultants. It was really fun because then we all got to do a lot of, it felt very entrepreneurial because he wanted to change the business. And one of, I was at that time 20 nothing and, working on two brands, the Signature Women's business, which I ended up working on solely, but at that time, and then the hand soap business, the antibacterial business, which was not its own category at the time. It was a very small business. I was just sort of, learning from all of the big wigs that were trying to actually restage, which means change all the package design for all the soap bottles, to give you a sense. Okay, so say it's like, I don't know, at that time, it was no more than a few $100 million of their total business. Okay, it was small relative to the rest of their business. And of that, the smallest percentage was sanitizers. Okay, so we're in a focus group, imagine, and there's these women that were in the focus group, it was all women happened to be, and they were looking at a bottle design, but pulling out these Purells, they were this big, out of their bag and now we all know that, but like doing this as they're evaluating these bottles, and everyone's concentrating on these bottles. And when we debriefed the focus group, I was like, but everybody in the focus group is pulling out these little Purells. Shouldn't we do that? Do we really need to change the bottle? So my favorite, it's a story I tell sometimes when people ask, because you're just the youngest person in the room and you're not necessarily trained yet to notice all the things they're trained to notice around the focus group, around the bottles and the design and what they're saying. I'm noticing these women pull out these mini Purells. And I was sort of like, well, I think we should do that. And because it was such a small part of the business, they just said, go ahead and do it. And PocketBac was born. So if any of you guys have used Bath and Body Works sanitizers, I got to name it, I got to design it. It was just this thing that came out of this little focus group by a 20 nothing person, because I didn't know how to evaluate focus groups really, or like package design. I was very young. So it's a fun story, but it's the first product I ever launched.
What did you call them? Pocket what?
They're called PocketBac. Now it's a pretty significant part of their business. So it's a cool little story. It started out with 5 fragrances and, the point of differentiation, right? Purell is Purell. It's just like now everybody's fragrances their sanitizers and has cute little bottles and all that stuff. The first one that ever came out was PocketBac by Bath and Body Works.
Yes. So it's an interesting question because I think it raises the trade-offs in venture. And so you ask kind of what I'm most proud of launching. And the reality of the situation is like, I think any venture capitalist who claims a lot of credit for their companies is overstating their impact. Like, I think a lot of times you might have a good idea here and there, you might make a good connection, or you gave some good advice, but ultimately you're not the person executing on the decisions. And ultimately you're not 100% held accountable. You're barely held accountable for the decisions that are being made by the entrepreneur. And so there's a disconnect between kind of you and what your portfolio is doing and what they're accomplishing. I always think of it as kind of the man in the arena, the person who's actually in there fighting the battles and getting bloody, kind of having the victories and the setbacks. As the VC, you're oftentimes just riding that, and in the day-to-day, not really feeling the emotional stress of having to make the decisions and execute and have the conversations and make the deals and everything else that actually happens in between board meetings. So it's something to think about. People think that they're interested in getting into venture and thinking about getting interested in consulting. I don't know, Sheila, if you'd agree with that. And you do get into the details, you do get involved kind of in working sessions, but ultimately there is a disconnect between kind of the responsibility of actually making things happen. So I think about that a lot. I think about that as my future. And if ever there's a spot for me to jump into a company or actually do something on the ground, it might be kind of cool to top things off at the end. But that said, we launched Harmonic. And so, I had 2 partners and we left a firm and we weren't paid for a while. And we took a lot of fundraising meetings, and we ultimately raised $75 million, which wasn't our goal, but it turned out that's what fate had for us for our first fund. And it was great. And it gave me a level of empathy for entrepreneurs around getting up and making it happen every single day. I gave our pitch, the Harmonic pitch, over 800 times. It's kind of funny, like if people ask me what Harmonic does, and I kind of started to do this at the beginning of our meeting, like I slip into the pitch and I almost can't deviate from it. Like it's almost like a well-worn path that I can't shorten it and I can't lengthen it. It's the exact words I say every single time at this point, just because I've given it so much. But I think if there's a level of pride of something that I built, it's probably that. I mean, we're off the ground. We have a firm, and hopefully we'll raise a fund too, and go on from here. And it'll have a future beyond me. But it's kind of cool being there at the ground level, making decisions. And what I would add is, I think in the startup world, one of the greatest things is a level of creativity you can show. You know, when I was at BCG, or when I was in the military, or when I was working for clients on site for Fortune 500. There's just not a lot of creativity you can show, but you have to as an entrepreneur, whether it's literally the creative of coming up with the brand and the positioning and things like that, but kind of how you tell your story and how you differentiate and how you engage with people and how you present kind of yourself. I think being an entrepreneur or being in a startup environment allows you that.
Great. All right. Thank you both for sharing your experience. I think we'll move on to some of your advice to our students here. So if you were in those students' shoes right now as a college student, what is one thing that you wish you knew, or what's the one advice that you would give to our students, knowing all of your experience and journey up to this point? Sheila, do you want to take it?
Oh, okay. I feel like there's many pieces of advice I would give myself if I were your age, so I'll give to you. I'll try and condense it. I think one of the things I would say is don't be afraid to put your hat in the ring. And if they're not knocking on your door, go knock. I think some of the greatest hires I've ever had were people that cold just emailed me and never came from an HR desk or a recruiting desk or any of that. One's a VP at EOS right now in brand development, and another one, you know, she still works, or she's moved on, but still works at Gotham Scholars. So, and I still have their emails because I was so impressed by how scrappy and like how they wanted it. So that don't be afraid to show the hunger. I think that would be one piece of advice for sure. I don't know, Mike, you have something?
But Sheila, can I add on that?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very hard to get into venture now. It's extremely competitive. You know, like tons of people apply for every single job. But it's wild that nobody reaches. Like we've had, I don't know, 15 to 20 people reach out to us over the last 2 years asking us for a job.
I know.
And it's bizarre.
It's like, bizarro. I don't know why people don't reach out.
Yeah, we're spending all our time investing in fundraising. We do need to hire people. We just haven't spent any time.
Yes.
And literally 15 to 20 people have reached out to us. And those are the people we're going to hire, by the way.
Absolutely.
Like it's like you have to, and like they're bringing us value. They're talking about our portfolio. They're trying to make introductions of our companies to other people. And I was like, why? I was like, why are people not doing this? You have to do some work. It's, you know, because I know the industry, there's certain SEC things you can look for that would tell you that a fund has been started. And so that would be kind of the leading indicator that you want to reach out to these folks. And so maybe that's a secret. Maybe that's a little too technical for people to find. But to me, it's baffling. Like
I could not agree with you more. And I think especially, you know, if you think of, that's certainly if you want to work for a more established startup, certainly Mike's startup, I mean, Gotham Scholars is, you know, constantly fundraising. That's how we go. But, you know, even I'm looking for people, but I don't have the time. All the staff I have is devoted to these students. I don't have the time to go. I certainly don't have the funds to go hire somebody to recruit people. And I wouldn't use my funds there anyway. And secondly, I don't have the time running all aspects of the business to go seek out people. So I think it's just strange to me for those people that are looking to work at a small business or at a startup, or even, you know, a relatively large small business, so I mean, you can really, that ceiling can be quite high. I don't know why. I'm curious, actually. I would, if I said, I would tell you now, do the research. Mike's right. You can't just cold without having, depth to what you offer and having thought about the company you're reaching out to, because we'll probably reach back. We'll probably reply. And I think people would, because they don't have the time to do that sourcing. And you're right. Every person that I have has cold, I mean, it's only two really for me. And those two, I mean, really, yeah, they were the best hires I've ever had.
Yeah, I would also, a couple other things. I would abuse your position as a student and just work the Northwestern
Absolutely.
alumni base. We have to pick up the phone. We don't have to, but like everyone's going to pick up the phone. I'm like, okay, what, spend a half hour with you, network that way, because as soon as you graduate, then you're just another person reaching out to talk to me.
That's right.
And so just abuse your position as a student. And then the little thing I mentioned before, like when you come out of HBS, they say you can either kind of plant your flag in geography, industry, or functional position. And in a good market, you can get all three. In a tough market, you might get two. I always tell people, like, pull the geographic flag. Like, I don't, when you're young, it doesn't make much sense to me to kind of say, I'm only going to live in Chicago. Or you might have some family situation, obviously, that dictates where you live. And I get that. But if you don't, then just go wherever the best opportunity is and wherever it actually is, because you'll move all over the place. I've lived 11 different places for over a year, including an aircraft carrier, and every single one of them was awesome. Like, I loved there. I made a bunch of friends. It was really cool. So I would say, do not worry about geography. Just go wherever the best absolute opportunity is. I thought I had something else. Oh, and I think in general, I tell people, I think the most important thing on your first job, one of the most important things, is finding a good mentor. So if you're debating between 2 or 3 jobs or something like that, and like, oh, this company's great, or this, whatever the situation is, I put a lot of weight on the person you're going to work for or with, or however you want to describe it. First of all, just tactically, they're going to rise up and they're going to bring you up within their pyramid. So it's just a way to kind of get ahead. That's the way it works. But also, like, they're going to teach you how to be a leader. And that's going to be the number one thing that's going to make a difference in years 5 through 15, and beyond. But like, as you're trying to figure out where you are and what you need to do, you're going to copy the people that you work for in large part. And so if you can find someone you think is a good leader and mentor, definitely go in that direction. I happen to have some incredibly good ones and then some horrific ones, and both, learn from both. But if there's a tiebreaker, go with a better mentor.
Yeah, can I build on that? Just a little anecdote. I really would, the power of a good mentor and knowing the team you're walking into, feeling comfortable asking questions about how they manage or how they lead teams, and asking when you have peer level interviews, because often if you're going to a company that has multiple layers of people, they might, give you a person that would be at your level or just one level above. Asking them the style would be really important. I had a mentor that would take me out of every meeting in 1999 and 2000 and debrief it with me, so I understood all the tech terms that were being said. I mean, that was incredible. Otherwise, I would never have been able to keep up. And I was so lucky. So I would really evaluate the teams that you're meeting and interviewing with.
All right, great. So I want to be mindful of time, and we'll go on to Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to go on video on mute, or again, just send me a chat message. I do have a few private messages if those folks want to ask those questions themselves, or I can shoot them. Yes, Stephen.
Hi. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm currently sophomore, and then I'm pretty involved with the garage, so I'm like a student startup founder. So I just have a question in terms of what are some tips you guys have for student founders to raise funds from VCs and angels, and how do we really approach to make those connections? Thank you.
Yeah, did you just participate in that Venture Cat?
No, I'm planning to next year. I'm currently a sophomore, so yeah.
Oh, is there a restriction on when you can
No,
participate?
no, I just don't think we're at that stage that are ready to compete yet. But we're gradually doing more pitch competition this year and hopefully participate next year in my junior year. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think there's different demo days you can sign up for, to kind of match kind of where you are stage wise. Different venture firms obviously host those. They do little dinners that you can reach out for, kind of just be on there. I get on everyone's Twitter feeds of the various early stage firms that you have respect for. Like, I don't know, go to First Round site, and they have a lot of resources, and they kind of give a heads up as to when and where these different things are actually happening for you to apply to. Depending on where you are, obviously, you probably don't want to take outside capital. You don't want to take dilutive capital. You don't want to take control capital. You probably want to participate in these venture competitions and kind of get the free money for a little bit of time and network through that, kind of get some angels to help you out along the way. Venture's in a tough spot right now. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but we're in another meltdown. And so a lot of people are sitting on the sidelines waiting for valuations to reset. So you probably don't want to raise money from a valuation perspective immediately. I mean, that's kind of a super tactical short-term issue. But that would kind of be my advice there. I mean, regionally in Chicago, they've always been trying to get a little bit more active. I think they still struggle as a city for entrepreneurial enterprise, but they're getting better. There's a few firms there. Those firms probably will take a cold email for lunch or something to kind of get word out, especially because you're Northwestern. They kind of might feel an obligation that they have to help out the local ecosystem. So I would take advantage of that.
Sheila, do you have any suggestions on funding and connecting with VCs?
Well, I think the one thing I would say to you is I did a lot of practice. When the practice rounds are really important. Demos, certainly, of course, but also I took meetings I knew wouldn't go anywhere because they took them, because at the time, okay, listen, Glossier was on fire. Everybody was talking about it. Like, beauty companies were things people wanted to talk, founders people wanted to talk to. I leveraged that for sure as an opportunity to hone my pitch. And there were definitely meetings I took I didn't really care for the outcome necessarily, and I think they helped me a lot. And I also would say, that's not the best thing. I feel kind of bad saying that with Mike there, because I feel like, people are looking for you to be genuine. And if you likely will have many rounds where you're stumbling and where it's just not right yet. They're going to ask you questions that's going to change your pitch, questions that you honestly wouldn't be able to predict until they looked at it, because they've seen 5 companies like you already and like can just see right through you. Like, I had somebody come to me and say, "Oh, you're like the Brown Glossier." Great. Like that. And so, I mean, you develop such a thick skin to that, and your pitch becomes very tight. So I would 100% echo. I actually, because I was an older founder, right, there were these mom groups and like mom entrepreneur groups and various groups that would hold contests and demo sessions. So that I took every opportunity. I just looked up all of those different groups because it was my sector and people that wanted to invest in me. And I took as many practice opportunities as I could.
Steven, you should join those mom groups. You're going to stand out.
Yeah.
And
the other thing, oh, sorry, can I just add one other thing?
Yeah,
I also looked for funding in odd places. So I didn't go to the most traditional routes. For example, with Graffiti Collective, we had a real sort of, our target customer definitely targeted people of color, and the products themselves did too. And I targeted Afropunk, which was a music festival in Brooklyn, and I met with the founders of Afropunk, and they invested with me. And then I had this booth that was sponsored by Target through it. But that was just me cold thinking about adjacencies and thinking about, who would be interested in what I'm trying to do and create space in their world for me. I don't know what your venture is, but that for me I found really helpful and lucrative.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I would just add, like, take the longer term view. Like, at this stage, like, you're really kind of building credibility within the ecosystem. And so you're pitching your idea, but you're just kind of showing a lot of people how you think about stuff, that you've thought through the issues, that you have the macro level picture in mind, that you know what the industry trends are, how you'd actually exploit this, and how you can think bigger. Like, I think, a lot of people come and pitch and they're just thinking about their little business, which may or may not succeed one way or the other, but they're not showing how they think about the market and why they're going after what they're going after, because everyone's going to say no, right? I mean, you're going to get hundreds of no's, but along the way, you're taking hundreds of meetings and you're going to rely on those people for the next 30 years. And so just keep the longer term view of just demonstrating who you are, because you're going to pitch the same people a different idea in the future. So just make sure that you don't burn the bridge, and you try to leave a good impression.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
What's your business?
So I actually have two different things. One is like a nonprofit. I help like music students get scholarships to go to conservatories. And then I recently co-founded another one, and we got about 15K from the garage as funding. It's also music, so I'm like very passionate about building startups in music, and then we're building games to help kids practice better. So we're helping them to like go over the boring fundamental concepts in terms of playing a game. So to help kids like stop from burning out from practices.
Oh my God, my kids could use that.
Oh, great.
Steven, I have a guy you should talk to. So
Great.
follow up and connect, and I'll connect you with Patrick Hudson, who
Yes.
Runs a gaming studio in Dallas. His kids are musicians, and he actually is trying to look for ways to invest in the space.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, that would be super helpful. Thank you so much.
He's a great guy.
Great.
And he's looking to spend money.
Okay, that's one connection made already. Do you have any other questions from the audience? Go for it.
Yeah, well, thank you both for taking the time today. I have a question regarding to one point that Sheila you made was about like you wanting to be someone's like right hand, and you kind of took that experience that 10 to 15 years and then pivot out of that. So I was wondering, I'm sort of in a similar spot right now. I'm going into the finance world. Like this is like a twofold question. So I realized you both like taking your military background or the consulting background and pivoted into the venture world, but have you guys seen someone did it from a finance background? How does that kind of what prior industry knowledge or what qualities from a finance perspective will be really helpful in the venture world? And then with regards to the kind of the right hand perspective, like what made you want to make that shift? And I was just wondering, kind of how did that shift happen? Do you think that's like a situational type of thing, or that's more of a personal growth type of thing?
Mike, you should answer the finance one.
Yeah. So the finance one, I definitely think so. I think when I got into venture, it was very common. Consultants and bankers; those are the two biggest channels to get into venture. That's no longer the case. It's entrepreneurs. Successful entrepreneurs are the most common channel for early stage and late stage to get in. So from that perspective, you have equal chance to become an analyst, I guess, at a venture fund, and an equally less chance to come in as a partner or general partner as an investment banker than what it used to be. But what it will do for you is you'll have the language better than a lot of entrepreneurs. You might see some pitches, or you might be in a certain world where you see pitches and decks and how people talk. And then you'll be in a better position to lay out your opportunity in a way that we're used to hearing it laid out. There's in any industry, there's a way that people talk. There's a way that they lay out their arguments. There's better ways to do it and worse, but you'll be in a circle where you'll be exposed more of what you need to cover and more comfortable with how you pitch the vision, while also subtly talking about what the business model is and kind of why you're exploiting that particular market or creating that particular market. So yeah, as an entrepreneur, there's it's no obstacles for you going forward.
I personally am grateful for the sort of structured and somewhat traditional foundation I come from. I think that both learning companies at a more macro level and in a high speed sort of way. And then, I had the fortunate opportunity of seeing a business double over 10 years, and watching and being sort of in the middle of all of the different parts of the business that contributed to that. So for me personally, I thought there's just no other, I got to actually have a view into, every department that would be required in a business by the time that I left Bath and Body Works. I was in a leadership team that, I would have built my executive team from. They were incredible, right? So when you think about starting out, I think making the leap is not necessarily, you don't have to be scrappy at the start to be scrappy at the finish necessarily. I actually think having depth and a real understanding of how a business works is great and very helpful in running a business. And if you tend to go, I can't speak to finance at any level of depth, so I won't even attempt to. But what I can speak to is I am so grateful that I had the years of experience to be able to then go launch my own company. I wouldn't trade that. I'm not saying that's the only path. Certainly there's a lot of young, more successful entrepreneurs than myself, as we all know. But I think that I don't think that's a hindrance at all. And then in terms of right hand to entrepreneur, I really didn't know that I wanted to assume the risk. I'll be honest with you. That was the question for me. And I felt like I knew what I knew, but I wasn't sure that I didn't think that I'd want to assume all of the risk with what I knew. And then when given the opportunity, I decided, yeah, I do. So I went for it, but I do think that was personal growth in the moment with the experience. I do, for me.
Got it. That was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for maybe one more quick questions.
Anyone else working on a business?
Or any ideas?
Take the opportunity if you do.
Mm-hmm.
Mike knows people with money.
I just did my first seed investment myself. I think it's gonna be an expensive lesson learned to find out.
So I'm building my advisory board right now, you guys, and I have the finance seat to fill. And that's a really important one, right? Because that's my ticket to be able to have like an arm in the fundraising world that can give me more than just the short-term raises. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to know a guy like Mike.
All right, if not, we're almost at time. Join me to thank again to both of our amazing panelists for this discussion. After we go back to the main room, we'll be opening up a individual breakout room. So definitely I encourage everyone to go into breakout rooms and connect. But with that, thanks everyone for coming, and I will see Warren back in the breakout in the main room.
Thank you.
Jonick.